Hello everybody, I'm Daisy Rain Martin, and it's good to be with you for this next little bit. I am genuinely happy and grateful to be with you in spite of the fact that we are several miles away from each other. Of course, I would be happier if we were together in person, sharing space in real time, but when we have to do the best we can, we just do the best we can. I suppose I'll start by telling you who I am, what I do, and lay out what I want to talk with you about. I know most people keep track of how many years they've been in the classroom, but I'm not exactly sure. Just shy of 30 years, I'm guessing. I've always had a love of writing, and I've written 3 nonfiction books. I spent about 10 years writing nonfiction for adults. That is all behind me now. I'll sell the rest of the copies of the books I have, but I have turned my focus to writing mostly fiction, with some nonfiction work scattered throughout for children and young adults. And I'm so grateful to have finally found my niche. I'm a Vegas girl, born and raised in the music industry. My grandmother was the manager for the Platters. They were famous in the 50s and 60s, and in fact, I think that influence has led me to believe that there are only 3 worthy endeavors in this life: to teach, to write, and to be a rock star. I did not get to be a rock star, but you know what? That's okay. Sometimes we have to recalibrate in this life. We're going to talk about that in a second. Hopefully, we are all where we were meant to be, doing what we are meant to do. Teaching and writing and continuing on our own academic journeys as students ourselves are among the greatest honors in this life, full stop. What we do for the next generation, what we contribute to our country, to our planet, really is sacred, which is why it is so disheartening when we are criticized in the public arena. I really wish I had a cure for that right now. If I did, I would just cut to the chase and tell you what it is and give it to you all for free. But I don't have it. I walk through this life the same as you. We've all spent this last year afraid at times, exhausted, frustrated, and sometimes just completely galled by decisions that we have no control over. We have all walked on water these last several months, and we've all gone under. So tonight, let's breathe a second, can we? And know this: you are extraordinary, you matter, you are needed, you are enough. This past year, please believe me when I tell you, you have been more than enough. Tonight is a celebration of teachers, writers, and young people who are working together to make the world a better, kinder, safer place for all. And all means all. All right, let's do this. As we come out of this pandemic, you guessed it, we will all have to recalibrate yet again, like we've been doing for a year. But we also need to rejuvenate. I know a lot of us would be happy if we could just recuperate. I'm here tonight to meet you where you are. I'm going to start with the sage wisdom of a certain Ms. Taylor Swift. I know I'm not really in her target market, but I love that little biscuit. She said something recently about recalibrating, which I think is a good jumping off place for us because it will also help us make sure we can rejuvenate. She said, "There's something about the complete and total uncertainty about life that causes endless anxiety. But there's another part that causes sort of a release of the pressures that you used to feel. Because if we're going to have to recalibrate everything, we should start with what we love the most first." Teachers aren't generally used to putting themselves first. We are educators, yes, but additionally, many of us are also nurturers and caregivers and empaths. Our work ethic is off the charts, and if we're not careful, we can grind ourselves into flour. We teachers have already recalibrated a bazillion times for everybody else. Since last March, we've done nothing but recalibrate continually. Teaching online, teaching in person, teaching on a hybrid schedule, figuring out Google Classroom and Canvas and all the other formats, Zooming and Google Meets, trying to get students engaged, walking a tightrope. over that fiery abyss of public opinion between grades and grace, rigor and flexibility, safety and insanity. This conference is called Writing with No Boundaries, a notion I can absolutely get behind. But I would suggest that teaching does have boundaries. We are human beings, and out of sheer self-preservation, we should set safe boundaries around ourselves in regard to our time, our personal space, our mental and emotional preservation, and acknowledge our limited capacity to bear grief and trauma. We have been encouraged to practice self-care, but too often we don't. And we often feel the weight of blame and inadequacy on our shoulders, and we shouldn't. We should give the same grace to ourselves as we would give our colleagues. If you struggle sometimes with that negative self-talk, flip a switch on that and pretend you're talking to someone else. Watch how incredibly kind and gracious you become and sit in that space for a while. I'm speaking out of my own lived reality here. A few years ago, I had so much anxiety that was anchored in rhetoric about teachers and public school. You've heard the noise, and none of it has any basis in reality. I wrote about it in my second book, Hope Givers, in a chapter called Zoloft, when the F word just isn't enough and the wine starts to sting your teeth. I'll just leave that right there. Let me read a little excerpt here and see if you can relate to this, okay? I'm going to put my glasses on. Okay. There are so many public education misnomers out there that make their way into our newspapers and onto our Facebook threads and drive us nuts. We allegedly don't say the Pledge of Allegiance anymore, because we're all a bunch of overpaid liberal socialists who took prayer and the Bible out of schools and get June, July, and August off, because we're lazy and teach our anti-God agenda and those who can do and those who can't teach, because we're not highly qualified to do what we do, and education is a joke in this country, and our schools are failing because of these teachers who don't want to do the work, so they make their students correct all the assignments and just give them worksheets all day and sit behind their desks and drink coffee. Yeah, good times. Here's what it looks like from our end. Not only do we say the Pledge of Allegiance every day with enthusiasm, we work hard to provide that liberty and justice for all, since we diligently and daily give the opportunity to be educated to every precious soul who walks through our doors, and in spite of the fact that we are grossly underpaid for building the infrastructure of this country, in light of the fact that we have never taken June, July, or August off. Because we are the very antithesis of lazy, and we are in fact passionate about what we do, because we are anti-ignorance and anti-poverty, and we know that the very best way to defeat those two social ills are to educate our children, for whom we pray incessantly, and sometimes desperately, regardless of where we are and whether we're clocked in at school or not, so that they might have a fighting chance in this world. And we do that every day because we can teach and we do teach, and we are so beyond highly qualified to do what we do that we never fail to jump through all the ridiculous political hoops and hurdles that are thrown in our paths amidst threats of having our teaching licenses revoked if we don't, so that politicians who are clearly not qualified, highly or otherwise, to do what they do can line their pockets with all the money that we don't make, which is the joke in education today, and it's not even funny. And anyone who thinks that we don't grade our students' work has never been down at the Flying M coffee garage with us on a Saturday morning, behind stacks of papers. And if we do give our kids a worksheet once in a blue moon, it has purpose and meaning, because everything we do is deliberate and important, or we don't do it. And who can blame us for the copious amounts of coffee we drink? You're lucky that's all we drink during the day, because so would you if you had to do bus duty in the freezing cold with kids who can't resist sliding on the ice, even though we've told them a zillion times to keep off of it, but they can't because it's like crack to them, and you would drink even more coffee if you had to field flaming, hostile, psycho phone calls from the occasional crazy sauce parent. Yeah, I said it. Trying to blame you for the state of the world, and God only knows what you would drink if you had to practice intruder drills like we do, because this world has sick, crazy, twisted people in it. So every once in a while, we cram desks and tables in the corner as silently as we can manage and shove our babies behind them while we stand between the locked door and your children, for whom we would give up our very lives, and some of us actually have. with nothing but a pair of scissors in our hands to ward off some monster armed to the hilt, so shut the hell up and stop posting that crap on your social media. Yes, I realize there are 558 words in that sentence. Yes, I am aware that I teach writing to 12-year-olds. What about it? Even before this last year, teachers have answered the call. We have done all that has been asked of us. We have worked our magic. We have walked on water. We've turned water into wine. So much wine. You know what? We cannot allow that brand of ignorance to enter our personal space. I'm done being pelted with negativity from people who don't know what they don't know. If anyone wants to have a real conversation about what's broken in education today, every single one of us is open to that. Let's have those conversations. But I have exhausted my capacity for nonsense in trying to defend my vocation and convince friends and relatives alike that there is no clandestine effort to take the American flag out of every classroom in the country. I have no more bandwidth for that kind of stuff. Shoo, bad dream. We ought to memorize the first stanza in the poem Ode by Arthur O'Shaughnessy, which was written to honor artists like us, who he believed propel society forward. Here it is. We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams, wandering by lone sea breakers and sitting by desolate streams, world losers and world forsakers, on whom the pale moon gleams. Yet we are the movers and shakers of the world forever, it seems. So you know what? Maybe there are certain ones in our lives who, if they are hungry, if they are thirsty, if they need shelter, safety, they absolutely have sanctuary with us. They will always have a place at our tables. But if for some reason, when they are once again full and warm and safe, if the words coming out of their mouths suddenly seek again to diminish our life's work and have no basis in truth, perhaps we can pack them a lunch, give them a warm coat and a good pair of sneakers, and walk them out beyond our space. Maybe set some boundaries. Recalibrating without the naysayers will be much easier. That is a given. I think that's important as we start the process of rejuvenation. If we don't set those boundaries, we will make ourselves more susceptible to all the fodder there is out there in the world. We need to give ourselves permission to set boundaries and engage in all the things that bring us joy. Remember what Ms. Swift said. If we're going to have to recalibrate everything, we should start with what we love the most first. It's time for us, for once, to choose ourselves. The world is going to have to give us a hot minute to rejuvenate. We all need to take this summer to find our warm, chewy centers. So my essential question to you is, what do you love? What do you love? I love gardening. I love feeding people, as many as I can. I love music. I love Riesling and a nice cheese platter. I really, really love carbohydrates. In fact, I never met a carb I didn't love. I love Hamilton. I've seen it on Disney Plus 9 times. I cried 9 times. I love the ocean. I love books. I love to write. I love to teach. I love to laugh. I love my husband and my kids and my grandkids. I love my circle of friends. I love puppies. And then I love giving them back to the owners before they pee on me. I love babies. I want to keep all of them, even if they pee on me. And as the world opens up again and we all begin to emerge, we need to heed the advice of Ms. Swift and think about what we love the most and start with that. It is essential to rejuvenate as we recalibrate again. What do you love? Make a list. Devote your summer to putting these things first. Keep all that you love forefront in your mind and in your heart. Show your devotion to all that you love with the time you spend with those things, those people, those relationships, those carbohydrates. Be intentional about it, purposeful, meaningful. Seek joy. Marinate in all the joy that you can, and let that rejuvenation process begin. The one thing we all love, or we wouldn't be here, are kids. Really, it's the adults that make us crazy, am I right? Right? So let's talk about kids for a minute and just how inspiring they really are. I've taught everything from kinder through 12th grade, almost every subject. I taught in 2 private religious schools, 1 charter school, and 3 public schools. Some of the best years of my teaching career were at Knutson, right down there, Sahara and Eastern-ish, in my hometown of Las Vegas. I loved it. I loved those kids, and they loved me. My husband taught there as well, and he agrees. Those were great years for us. I remember my car wouldn't start one day after school, and we had to leave it in the parking lot. I hated that car. And I told my husband, I guess we ought to call a tow truck and drag it someplace to get it fixed. And he said, hold on. No, we could leave it here. And no one touched it. It stayed just like we left it, intact, all 4 tires, windshield, bumpers, stereo, all there 3 days later. And I sort of tossed it out to my kids. Hey, my car's been in the parking lot for 3 days. Still there. Curious, don't you think? My Umberto said, oh, we got you, miss. I put the word out. Nobody touches that car. So we called a tow truck. But we were so heartened because that was a really beautiful moment with some beautiful kids. And every single day we were there, we were uplifted about how much beauty there really is in the world. Kids are beautiful. They're funny, they're smart, they'll keep you on your toes. Believe me when I tell you, you have not lived until you have been patronized by a bunch of 8th graders. I swear their entertainment value alone is worth the price of admission. I don't know if KO is still a magnet school or not, but it was when we were there. And I want to gently acknowledge that there was an unfortunate division, I think, back then between the magnet students and the zone students. My husband and I taught zone kids, and the dynamics were interesting. The space between the 2 sets of students often felt a bit empty for my liking. It very much seemed to me a snapshot sometimes of the haves and the have-nots. And the students that my husband and I taught often felt less than. And we did everything we could to fill up that space with love and hope, to reassure them that they were extraordinary, that they mattered, that they were needed, that they were enough, because they were, and they still are. There's an author you probably know, M.T. Anderson. I read his acceptance speech when he won the Margaret A. Edwards Award in 2019. I've only read one of his books, Feed, which is a crazy, amazing book. He definitely has a niche in this industry. And he certainly has a lot to say about the human condition and the condition of our world today. He says straight up in that speech, we don't have to imagine a dystopian world. We live in one. But he is also filled with hope. And he thinks we should be too. He says the generation of teens currently reading our books are deeply committed to transforming their world, saving the earth. They know the stakes. We are a nation galvanized and ready for revision. The young are right with us on the front lines. Imagine how different we all would feel if each day in the news we read about nations actually addressing the apocalyptic crises we really face, instead of the bizarre face-offs and tantrums that endanger us all. Imagine the lightness of working together for a change. And he's right. I posted a video on my website, the song Youth by Shawn Mendes and Khalid. Watch it all the way to the end and see the number of extraordinary young people from all over the world who know the stakes who understand the fragility as well as the potential of the human condition right now as we speak. Young people who have decided to do something about it, to become hope givers and music makers, the dreamers of dreams, the movers and shakers. They're not waiting for permission or even validation. These are kids who understand what Augustine said about hope. That hope has two beautiful daughters, anger and courage. Anger at the way that things are, and courage so that things do not remain as they are. Our kids are angry, and rightly so, at the way that things are right now, at the conditions that have been allowed to devolve in the preservation of profit over people. Our kids are also courageous, and God bless them for it. Because we have young people like Chutezkat Martinez, who advocates for our planet, who fights hard for environmental justice and the protection of our earth. We have young people like Bana Alabed, a peace activist who, at only 8 years old, wrote a book called Dear World, a Syrian girl's story of war and plea for peace, because she has seen horrors in her country that no child should ever have to witness. No child. We have young people like Sunita Alizada, a rapper and an advocate for girls who are being forced into marriage. She herself escaped child marriage twice, once at just 10 years old, and again at 16 when she wrote and recorded a song called Daughters for Sale about her fears of being sold as a child bride by her family. It went viral and she escaped. We have young people like Marley Diaz, who committed to getting 1,000 books with Black protagonists into the hands of 1,000 Black girls. She wrote a book about her own advocacy work and encourages other young people to advocate for the issues that matter to them. It's called Marley Diaz Gets It Done, and so can you. We have young people like Amariana Kopany from Flint, Michigan. She wrote to President Obama about the water situation in her town. He came to visit. She also gave 1,000 backpacks away to other children. We have young people like Anne Makasinski, who invented a flashlight that's powered by body heat. No more batteries in landfills, and she's also provided a way for people who don't have electricity for whatever reason to have light. She also invented an e-drink that cools your hot beverages by turning that heat into electricity that will charge your devices. It's brilliant. We have young people like Cassandra Lynn, who found out that cooking oil could be turned into biofuel. She convinced local restaurants to donate their used cooking oil to be recycled. She was in 5th grade. I didn't even know what biofuel was in 5th grade. Or college. But what do all these kids have in common? How did they become hope givers and world changers? First of all, they all had and have skin in the game, which has empowered them to speak up and act. Second of all, they figured out that being a hope giver is not sitting behind a computer trying to change the world one Facebook meme at a time. They refuse to sit in the stands. They are flooding into the arena. You understand what happens in an arena, right? People who live their lives in the arena can get hurt. We have all seen grown adults excoriating young people who have stepped up to make this world a better, kinder, safer place for all. But I think these kids are also students of the wizened sage Brené Brown, who talks about living life in the arena and getting pelted with criticism from those sitting in the stands. Brené says, "If you are not in the arena getting your ass kicked on occasion, I am not interested in or open to your feedback. There are 1 million cheap seats in the world today, filled with people who will never be brave with their own lives, but will spend every ounce of energy they have hurling advice and judgment at those of us trying to dare greatly. Their only contributions are criticism, cynicism, and fear-mongering. If you're criticizing from a place where you're not also putting yourself on the line, I'm not interested in your feedback. Young people are angry at the state of the world, and they're courageous enough to do whatever they can to make sure that things change. They are not confused one iota as to the problems we face. They are confident that we have the ability to solve our societal problems. What they're not convinced of is whether or not those in charge will do the right thing. So they have asked the hard questions and demanded real answers. They have spoken truth to power, and they are not letting up. They have persevered and pushed through the opposition that comes when any of us stand up for what is right against those who are doing what is wrong. After the Parkland shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, young people were galvanized once again. In 2018, the young people who survived that horrific event called for students across the country to walk out of their classes and protest gun violence in their schools. Many of the middle schoolers where I teach were all about it, and it wasn't just to get out of class. There was a buzz among our students who were organizing the effort, and I thought, this is so exciting. Because my take on it was basically this. These kids want to be agents of change on an issue that is of great importance to them, their very safety. We should in no way discourage this. I don't care if they want to do a sit-in in the cafeteria to bring back corn dogs on Wednesdays. I mean, let them practice standing up for the things they believe in with us in a safe environment. If we put the kibosh on this, the world will never change. Those who are made to feel like they don't matter on this planet will be forever stuck on these hamster wheels, their whole lives spun by people for whom the world is not broken. Those of us whose lives are safe and have some measure of security ought never to stand in their way. We need to join them. We need to amplify their voices. We need to make it very clear that they matter to us. So here's what happened. As it turns out, I really do have the best principal in the entire galaxy. I do. He called the kids into his office who were leading this effort, and he listened to them, because he always listens to them. What they wanted to do, how they wanted to do it. He listened to why they wanted to join the nation's children in this. And when they had made their case, he had only one question for them. He said, "Would it be okay if we join you in this?" And they were thrilled. They were thrilled at the thought of doing this together. Their voices were heard, they were taken seriously, and with the support of adults, they were kept safe. Now, full disclosure, Idaho is gun country, and not everyone was on board for political reasons that I can't really wrap my head around, but here we are. We made space for every child and adult to participate if they chose to do so, and also to stay in class if they chose that. No judgment either way, and it was a win. Some young people come by this naturally, but we have to teach our children to question us. Yes, us. We need to give them a safe space to ask all their hard questions and teach them how to find the answers they seek and change the things that need to be changed. Let me share one more story with you, and then we'll start to wrap this up. One of my favorite kids authors is a guy named Gary Schmidt. He teaches English at Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He has won Prince Awards and Newberries for his work. His book, Lizzie Bright and the Buckminster Boy, is my favorite book of his. You should all Google him and buy everything he's ever written for children. He's remarkable. He is smart, funny, poignant, so talented. I have used his books, Wednesday Wars and Okay for Now, in my classroom. I had a student teacher one semester who was smitten with him, just like I am, or as my students would say, schmitten. Pretty clever. And my student teacher said to me, Daisy, we have to find this Gary Schmidt guy. We should see if we can Skype with him or something. The kids would love it. And I said, let's do it. Find him. My student teacher found Dr. Gary in about 6 seconds, and we emailed him. Long story short, Gary said he'd love to Skype with our classes, and we put together an event for the entire 7th grade. Well, the morning of the event, however, Gary called me. He's very distraught, and he could not make the Skype session. He was on his way to the emergency room. Tragedy came for him that day, and we found out later that he lost his wife a few weeks after that. We were all so devastated. Just, Dr. Gary is a real person in my class. He is beloved. I was in the midst of writing Hope Givers back then, and because I was just so saddened from his loss, I wrote a piece about Gary because he is such a hope giver to so many of us. Just wanted to honor him and his work, and also to honor his wife, Anne. I shared that piece with my students. And I happened to mention that I wished I could maybe include that excerpt in my book, Hope Givers, but, probably not. Well, obviously they were like, you have to send that to Dr. Gary. But it was a non-starter. I couldn't do that. I was always going to be that teacher from Idaho who was supposed to have a Skype session on one of the worst days of his life. I couldn't intrude on his world, some teacher fan who merely wanted him to Skype with her kids. There was no way I was going to puncture his space and make him relive any portion of that horrible day. I never wanted to be the point person for his pain. But my kids hounded me. They're like, you're being ridiculous. You have no good reason for keeping this from him. He'll love it. And maybe he'll let you put it in your book. I was like, no. And then they were like, we can't believe you're acting like this. Like, who are you? My kids would not accept the fact that we were the school with whom Dr. Gary would always associate this tragedy, that the stars had cruelly crossed us in this way. So, in the midst of this ongoing debate, this thing happened, and it was really weird. One of my students came up to me while I was on morning duty in the cafeteria and said to me out of the clear blue sky, "Good morning, Mrs. Martin. I got Dr. Gary's autograph for you." I said, "I'm sorry, what?" And she just smiled and said, "I got Dr. Gary's autograph. I found it in a book he wrote at the book swap in the library. It fell out of a book I was holding, and I asked the librarian if I could give it to you because I knew you would want it. Here you go." She handed me a quarter sheet of very fine quality paper, and on one side was a picture of Gary's book, Okay for Now, and on the other side it said, "Dear Phil, write well, yours, Gary." I cried right there in the cafeteria between the stairs and the Aquafina water machine. I didn't care if it was written for some guy named Phil. I held that paper close to my heart like some kind of crazy psycho stalker fan, and I thought my kids are going to flip clean out. And guess what? My kids flipped clean out. They were screaming. They became a mob. They got up from their chairs. Their hands were on their heads. They were pointing at me. They were yelling at all at once. They were like, "It's a sign. You have to send him that piece you wrote." And like that this doesn't just happen. And how can you not send it to him now? You know that God just sent you a sign. This is a miracle. Like, how do you argue with that? One kid pointed to my face and yelled, "If you don't send him that piece you wrote, then you're just dumb." It was suddenly so quiet in that room, you could have heard a mouse fart. And I looked at that young man and I said, who told you you could speak to me that way?" And they all screamed, "You did! You told us that when we feel strongly about something, that we should find our voices and speak up, that we need to advocate for what we want to see happen in the world." And I said, "Okay, I'll send it." And they were floored. And so was I. They reveled in the collective new notion that their voices could be heard, that they could stand up for something they felt strongly about and change the trajectory of an entire situation, that they could have enough hope from someone else who was coming up short on that whole hope thing, even though she was writing a book about hope. And they were there to take every single bit of the credit. When Dr. Gary wrote back, he called my writing lovely. And he graciously gave me his blessing to include it in my book, Hope Givers. The following year, one of my students actually emailed Dr. Gary out of the blue, and he wrote her back. She wanted to share with me their conversation. I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little nervous. So she began, "Dear Mr. Schmidt," and I thought, "Oh, it's Doctor." She said, "My name is Kay. I am in the 7th grade. Mrs. Martin is my English and literature teacher. I have learned so much from her." And I'm thinking, so far so good. Then she says, "Mrs. Martin is in love with you." I truly considered dangling her over the balcony by her ankles. She says, "Her husband is my science teacher, and I'm pretty sure he is jealous of you." Just kill me now, right? But then she asked him to please come to our school and how much it would mean to all of us, and how if she has to, she will have every single one of the students in the entire school email him every single day until he comes, and that's a lot of emails, so please could he come? And then she was forgiven. And you know what? He came. He came to our school. He stayed at my house. He ate at my table. He teased me about reading the Twilight series. He magically and expertly held 700 kids in rapt attention with his stories for over an hour, signed books, did a workshop for some of our young aspiring writers, and he was an absolute rock star. My husband smiled a lot. He nodded a lot. God bless him. The entire event was terrific. And you know who pulled all that off? 12-year-olds. They literally were in charge of everything. I barely did anything except feed the man and give him a place to stay. Here's the thing. We have to show young people how very powerful they are by giving them a chance to do exactly that. We have to show them the power of their words and the power of their resolve. We have to show them how beautiful they make the world. Let me go back to M.T. Anderson. He says, "This is what I have wanted to say to my readers all along. You're standing here on this earth for a little while. I'm standing beside you. Let me tell you about the world I see. You tell me about the world you see. And together, we're going to make the world that you wish to inherit. This is how we will tell new stories of hope." Real quick, let's talk about writers who tell stories about hope. We leave legacies. We leave proof that we were here. We came to this earth. We conquered, and we got conquered. We leave our words. We leave our stories. We leave our hearts on the written page. Collectively, we have watched every current generation acknowledge how generations before them have brought this world to a more precarious place. The sum of us, so far, has watched each generation kick the can down the road, always expecting the next generation of young people to fix what's broken in our world. And yet, teachers and writers and young people are in my humble opinion, as O'Shaughnessy's ode says, the movers and shakers of the world forever, it seems. Teachers and writers are the ones who have always been on the front lines, equipping young people by writing and telling our stories and teaching them to do the same, helping them to delineate between what is true in this world and what is false by showing them how to think critically. We assure our students that they are extraordinary, that they matter, that they are needed, that they are enough, and we infuse them with courage. There are those of you who are listening to this right now who dream of being writers. I used to dream the very same thing, but I didn't know how to start, so for a long time I didn't. Then one day, Jeff Probst, the Survivor dude, who apparently also writes, said something to the effect of, I meet people all the time who say they want to be writers, but they never write. Guilty as charged. So that very day, I started writing, and I haven't stopped. The decade that I spent writing nonfiction for adults and hustling speaking gigs and burning myself out and grinding myself into flour and getting on Zoloft came to an abrupt end one day. I had a student in my class ask me if I would ever quit teaching in the classroom and go to work for our school's district office. And another student really quickly just answered for me. He said, "Dude, she doesn't even like adults." Touché. And I thought, he's so right. Adults are so exhausting. And in that moment, I knew I needed to write for kids and I needed to switch to fiction. So now that's my gig. That's my jam. I will graduate from Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota this July with my MFA. It is one of the 2 programs in the country that focus specifically on writing for children through young adults. And guess who suggested that endeavor to me? A certain Dr. Gary D. Schmidt. It's one of the top best things I've ever done in my whole life, hands down, is to apply to that program and get accepted and do the work. So my second essential question to you after what do you love is, what is in your heart to write? What is in your heart to write? Because remember, there are only 3 worthy endeavors on this planet: to teach, to write, and that other thing. If you want to write, I want to help you, because I think everybody should write and leave their mark on this world. By the fall of this year, I will have my MFA in hand, and in addition to working on my own projects and getting published in the Kid Lit arena, I am going to offer a virtual workshop in the fall for beginning writers, people just starting out. The price will be very doable, and we'll have a lot of fun. Then in the winter of 2022, I will offer an intermediate class for anyone interested, as well as another beginning class. I won't do advanced classes because that just makes no sense to me. I would just send you to Hamline and get your own MFA, and you can do exactly what I do and what a lot of other people are doing, living the dream, sucking the marrow out of life, right? But definitely reach out to me, contact me through my website or on social media if you want to know more. I am here for you. Let's do this together. We need each other. We really do, because we all live in that arena. We are working together to make this world a better, kinder, safer place for all. And all means all. So remember, recuperate and rejuvenate. Seek joy. You are extraordinary. You matter. You are needed, and you are more than enough. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me this evening. I want everybody to hang tight because I think we're all going to Zoom together in just a second. Love you.